It's not working. It's not working.
How do you know it's not working?
'Cause it's, I don't know. Oh yeah, there it goes.
You just can't see it?
Nope.
That's weird. I can't see it. Can I wait now?
Yeah, you wait now. Oh. So what you do is you write down. No, I give you this
I'll
part.
write as much as I can for you.
Well, and yeah,
So like there's questions and stuff like that.
yeah, and people, yeah. And then we'll put the both of them together. I'm just gonna run about 5 minutes.
Nora put him on the end here.
Oh, we're being close tonight. Let me get this water. I'm just keeping everyone on their toes tonight. It's not cold. That's what Michael wanted. I wouldn't want someone to put a plaque on my bench.
I beg your pardon?
I wouldn't want someone to put a plaque on my dad's bench. Second plaque. No. No.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight to the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee tonight. I call the meeting to order at 5:30, and the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. So could I get a motion, please?
We'll move.
And okay, so the motion carries. Second item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Discussion, anyone? Okay, motion is carried. Third item on the agenda is new business. We have some special guests here tonight, friends of the Havenwood Park Steering Committee. Welcome, and we have a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gibbs Small, 614 Grand Rose Terrace. Madam Chair, members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity we have to meet with you today and to make a presentation. This is a step that I think has been coming for a long time, and we have now formally formed the Friends of Havenwood Park. At present, there are 4 of us that are on the committee, and we've had contact in the last 3 weeks with at least double that many again who want to get involved and become part of this community group. So I'm going to turn the microphone and the clicker over to Gary Nielsen, who is the chairman of the committee, and he is going to walk you through a slide presentation along with Bruce Brown and Bruce's wife Carol. Those are the 4 of us that are on the committee, and they're going to walk you through and just go through the process of how this committee formed, what the background is with the committee, and what the benefits both for the community and for Colwood as a municipality are. Gary?
Good evening. My name is Gary Nielsen. I live at 3598 Caledon Place. Can you hear me through this? Okay. Good, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Gibbs Small for preparing the slideshow here. It'll help me speak on our group. And also to Nora for helping us so much to get this organized so we can present here, and also to the committee for accepting our request to present. So the first slide is basically a park overview. It's 40 acres. I'm sure most people on the Parks Committee are familiar with the park. I don't have to talk about it too much. It was purchased in 2002 by Colwood for $500,000, and another 50 grand was chipped in by Langford. And there's details around that happened around that time. It was since the 70s land that was owned by the provincial government, and Colwood made a great decision moving forward with this purchase, I think. In 2002, I also moved to the area, and Havenwood Park became my backyard, more or less. I live right next to it. In 2002, I was actually working as a park ranger, and my experience ranged from the Carmana Valley to Mount Suhalem. Pretty well every parks and protected area that the province managed, I had set foot on. So when I walked through Havenwood Park, I right away noticed the features in this park. And I noticed how valuable they were. In 2005, after the land was purchased, was when this the park management plan was prepared by the City of Colwood and Habitat Acquisition Trust. And I first read that management plan in actually about 2010. Like, so for a lot of people in our area, a lot of the residents, they're not really aware of, you know, how important it is to have this nature park in their neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons we're forming. The Habitat Acquisition Trust, I first connected with them shortly after reading the management plan, because one of the things I noticed about the park was that there was some invasive plant species there. I recognized them all as I walked through the park in the early days as I was getting to know it. And it set off alarm bells for me, because I knew these invasive plants were very aggressive, some of them, and it was a time, as it stated in the management plan, that they needed to be controlled before they got a real foothold in the park. And so with the park itself, the physical attributes, very complex, comprised of moderately to steeply sloped hillsides, an elevation of about 100 to 165 above sea level, bedrock outcrops. Now the bedrock outcrops, I know from my time working for the Ministry of Environment that the significance of those is the Garry Oak ecosystems in them, very threatened. Havenwood Park has got some very valuable sections in these rocky outcroppings. I know from the 2006 baseline inventory that was done after the management plan was developed. It's basically a baseline inventory that biologists came in and did what they call a baseline inventory of plants, geography, all of those attributes of the park. Within that, they identified the Garry Oak ecosystems. Actually, in one of those Garry Oak ecosystems, after the baseline inventory, a very knowledgeable biologist came in after the fact, did another sweep at a different time of the year, and in one of those ecosystems found 40 to 50 rare and endangered Nuttall quillworts. That's a rare and endangered blue listed plant. So there's some real significant values there that go beyond Colwood, regional values, Canadian values really for some of these rare plants. Also the red-legged frog was spotted in some of the more riparian areas. Wetlands riparian habitat, which the little red-legged frog was found in. Permanent and ephemeral water courses. That's a word I can hardly pronounce. What it means is that along with the permanent water courses in the park, there are certain areas, and one of these is an area in one of those Garry rock outcroppings where the Garry Oak ecosystem is. One of those, it means areas that are wet most of the year but dry up in the summer, and that's perfect habitat growth for that endangered plant, and that's why it's found there. And then a mixed cover of second growth coniferous and deciduous forests, and this includes some dry Douglas fir forest, which you may be aware of is important on Vancouver Island. We're losing it. There's not much of it left. It's kind of an endangered ecosystem itself. So this covers a lot of attributes to the park that made me recognize early on, once I got more engaged with Habitat Acquisition Trust, it confirmed it, that this Friends of Havenwood Park group needed to be formed. The trails used by local residents are the recreational component of it. We as a group don't really expect to get that involved in that because the City of Colwood's park staff do such an incredibly good job of that. We would maybe be involved working with Habitat Acquisition Trust in the city as far as, you know, maybe as a management plan states, which trails shouldn't be used, which is one of my concerns right now around the trails I could speak a bit on. Along with the invasive plants, are what I see as the current threats right now where we perhaps could work with the city and PAT to maybe help control where there shouldn't be trails. It's getting a lot more use in recent years. As a person that lives there and is in the park quite a bit, I've noticed with the development around the park that the trail issue is becoming important. because I think there's going to be impacts to the park around that. We want people to use trails that fit the management plan. And so with the management plan establishes the vision and goals for Havenwood Park and describes generally how it will be managed in the future in order to meet this vision and goals. It's been prepared to assist the City of Colwood to manage the natural resources of the park and human use of thereof, which ties to the natural resources and what I'm speaking about on the trail use, and ties to our group forming to help this happen. It provides a framework for decision-making to ensure that the ecosystems of the park are conserved and that the development, use, and maintenance of the park have limited impacts to the ecosystems thereof, which pretty well means that when the park was bought and the management plan was prepared, it's actually designated in Colwood as a nature park that provides passive recreation for residents. So primarily a nature park, but they're also for recreational use. If the the recreational use to conform to the management plan. Recommendation number 30, which is an important part of the management plan for us. It recommends that a community partnership of park management be established for Havenwood Park, which is kind of why we're here tonight. In 2010, when I first realized it had a management park plan, I've been patiently waiting for 4 years or so. I've been involved with HAT with their restoration projects. All along the way, I've been told by the covenant holder that, it's hard to get volunteers these days. Their resources are stretched. There's areas like what Colwood has in Havenwood Park all around the region, and a lot of this work relies on volunteers. So patiently waiting until this day when I have 3 like-minded citizens in Yib, Bruce, and his wife Carol. We are here today, and the kickoff for this can start. And I'm confident that we have a great team, and it's going to be a privilege to be able to work as a team with HAT in the city down the road. And hopefully that will happen. The recommendation number 31 in the management plan really goes into more detail around that need. That the City of Colwood establish a co-management committee to guide the sustainable management and development of Havenwood Park. That the committee be comprised of representatives of the city, that is the Parks and Recreation Standing Committee, or members of council and staff, the covenant holders being HAT, and actually the Nature Conservancy of BC, and members of the public at large, with none of the above associations. So that pretty well means a more or less, I think, I read that as an informal, perhaps, group, which is what we are forming. I don't know how formal that will be. There's been discussion we had at a previous meeting with city staff that we could become a citizens committee. But that's probably to be discussed in the future more. Recommendation number 32 in the management plan also ties to this Friends of group. That the City of Colwood support and encourage the formation of community-based Friends of Havenwood Park, or other suitable name, we like that one, group to work with the city in the management, development, and education for the public for Havenwood Park. That at the discretion of the management committee, a representative of the Friends of Havenwood Park might sit on the management committee. So the management committee, since the management plan's been developed, firstly, it's overdue for what it's suggested that it has a, there's no real solid time frames, but it's suggested that after 5 or so years, it be reviewed, perhaps updated, things like that. It also, right off the get-go, recommended that a park management committee would be formed. And to me, that it's probably the time that perhaps should be looked at a little more closely. I'm hoping that a parks management committee will be formed soon with the city and HAT's lead, because right now we all know how much development is happening around the park. The longer we wait, the more chance of things happening to this nature park that we don't want to happen. So our purpose statement, to follow that up, we brainstormed it. We started in December, first time we met as a team, and we hashed out, well, what's our vision or what's our first purpose statement? We came up with this: to help preserve the natural environmental features of Havenwood Park by raising community awareness through ecological restoration events, park walks, and other activities that also help to connect people with nature. Our key long-term goals: enhance and improve the environmental integrity of the park in keeping with the management plan, help manage ecosystems in partnership with the community, municipalities, and the covenant holders, provide education to our community about the ecological values and sensitivities of the natural amenities of the park, contribute to social well-being of our neighborhoods by encouraging active participation with nature. So that's pretty well our goals in a nutshell. I mean, there's benefits to everyone, including the residents who use the park, we feel in those goals. A thing that's come up at the last minute that Bruce is going to talk a bit about this. It goes a bit beyond the scope of our group and why we initially formed, but it speaks on an idea that Carol came up with, Carol Brown, and it's an idea around the trail networks and potential of that go outside Havenwood Park. So I'll let Bruce speak on that.
Thanks very much, Gary. And thank you to the committee for allowing us to be here tonight. And my wife apologizes. She's at a Robert Bateman volunteer event downtown. She's going to try to get him to come out to our event in May. So while she's there, it should be nice. Thank you to Colwood for doing this great map of all the parks. And we had this little idea that this little red line here could be known as the Colwood Sea to Sky Park Trail, starting at Esquimalt Lagoon, going all the way down through the various green spaces, up through the various parks, including Havenwood and Lookout Lake, at very little cost to the city of Colwood. It's all the parks are already there, with the exception of two little roads, Winthrop and part of Wishart, going down to Latoria Park. But all that really would be required are some posts to point people in the right direction, maybe a little bit of signage to talk about what this is. And it could be kind of a neat thing to have. I think there's many other areas in the vicinity, the new Royal Bay Park area, that you could have links to it. So there could be quite a several, well, probably 50 or 60 kilometers worth of trails if done properly with some signage. So that's kind of a bit of an aside as to why we're here tonight, but we thought that Friends of Havenwood Park could actually show some leadership, and maybe there could be some community-wide groups that form to, as we all know, development is creeping out this way, and it would be great to be able to keep as much of this parkland and green space as possible. So that's a little idea. And although Carol put Colwood Parks Trail, she phoned me on her way down to see the Bateman event. Oh, let's change it to the Sea to Sky Trail. So that's for future reference. Are we moving on to the next slide? Sure, yeah. So obviously our group will need some partners, including the city of Colwood. We've already had some great assistance. And I must say that the parks workers have done a great job. Even driving here today, the tulips on the corner of Wishart and Cairndale, just gorgeous. And I know Gord wants to try to use as many native plants as possible, which leads to another little aside that we brought up at our last meeting at the city of Colwood. The municipality of Saanich has a program, a salvage program, plant salvage program. So when developers come into their municipality and are going to be developing a piece of property for housing or whatever, part of their development plan, they have to give the city of Saanich notice that people can come into trained people can come into that land and salvage native plants to be used in parks. And I know Gord, I think, I don't want to speak for you, Gord, but I think you think that would be a pretty good idea. It'll continue the use of native plants within our parks here in the city of Colwood. There's a bit of a cost-saving feature, too. I know when we go to try to buy native plants at the Swan Lake plant sale, they're $15 to $20 for a small little tub, so if we can get them for free and use them in the parks, that's a pretty good cost saving, as well as just using native plants. So that's something that I think the city of Colwood is going to help us out with and look at whether that could be part of any development plan that is approved. So if Parks and this committee has any input on that, we'd be happy to have your support for that. Another great partner organization that sort of started the ball rolling here, obviously, is Habitat Acquisition Trust. They have a pretty good group of volunteers that have been coming out and doing restoration work in the park and have continued to do that and working with us and helping us get started. Some other partners, obviously the City of Langford that chipped in some money, the Gowerts, I think they're called, the Gary Oak Recovery Team. School District 62, my wife is a retired school teacher who still has her teaching certificate, so one of her discussions with Jim Cambridge, superintendent, is to go into the schools and try to encourage classrooms to adopt, some classrooms to adopt the park and perhaps both for education purposes and helping us in some of the restoration work as well. And a relatively new volunteer organization that started in Vancouver, I think it's called the Vancouver Green Team, and it's just within the last few months formed in Victoria. They had 3 or 4 volunteers out to our restoration event on March 14th in the park, and they seem pretty excited about coming out and helping in future events. So I think it's great that people within the capital region are coming out and working in the Colwood parks. And the CRD as well. This is just a picture of, I'm going to turn this over to Gary because he's more of the biologist than I am, but this shows a little bit of little worker bees in the forest before we had to call it because of wind. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a slide of an event that happened just a few days ago. And it's an example of what's been going on since about 2011. HAT got together with the Victoria Green Team, and this event went on, and it's the first time actually in the park that the restoration plant removal for invasives was focused on holly and Daphne. So that's the crew we had out there. Very enthusiastic, and this is the kind of thing that we're hoping that we can have at the ready for however this plays out, whether it be HAT, whether it be the city. Our goal is to have a local community group of volunteers that we can call on, like this group, that are based in Langford and Colwood and anywhere else on the West Shore who want to kind of join us. We'd have a steering committee, but we hope to build up an on-call group of volunteers for restoration events like this and so on. And speaking of events, we've planned a kind of a coming out event on May 2nd. We're calling it a spring wildflower event. We have guest speakers. There'll be nature walks led by the guest speakers and free snacks and refreshments. So this is something we've brought to Nora's attention. And of course, HAT's been working with us on this. We're in the early stages of planning and organizing it. And it's coming together quite well. We've got a planning document on it. One of the latest things we've been able to do, because one of the things we had to first get on a start on is this guest speaker aspect. Now, Carol connected with Royal Roads and the First Nations peoples. They have shown a great interest and be able to participate as a guest speaker, give First Nations blessing for our event, and perhaps take, we're not quite sure at this stage if we'll have 1 or 2 walks. I'm envisioning 2, because there would be a walk for people that might not be able to do the native wildflower walk because, well, you know, age or just for various reasons not be able to hike those secondary trails. First Nation speaker would take a group along the main trail of Havenwood Park and give a talk on First Nations history. The guest speaker I'm kind of excited about, Bruce has been able to connect and has a history with Andy McKinnon, who some of you may know was on the chair of, I think he was on the chair of the Habitat Acquisition Trust board when the covenant was produced. So he's really got some history to this park, and he's enthusiastic by what we're doing. And he co-wrote this book, which is, to me, well, what this actually is to everybody here that's involved with native plants in British Columbia is the Bible to identifying plants in coastal British Columbia. So for him to get on board with this is just really exciting. The other thing around this event is Carol's not here tonight because she's hanging around with one of my favorite environmentalists. His name's, is it Robert Bateman? Yes, Robert Bateman. So she's maybe going to put a little nudge into Robert tonight to say, maybe you'd like to show up for our May 2nd event. We'll see how that goes. So anyway, said we're going to be brief here, and I'm sure the clock's been ticking by. That's pretty well it. I really want to thank you for letting us formally introduce our group. And I guess the bottom line here is one of the things we'd like to do is really be recognized by the city as an official group, as a volunteer group for Havenwood Park. That would be one of our goals for introducing ourselves tonight. One other thing that I did do, how restricted am I with time? Can I have 5 or so more minutes, or are we kind of restricted for time? Or this morning I went through some things that I can briefly cover on a wedge page here. That it's basically around management plan recommendation number 30, and basically some points on Colwood benefits from Friends of Havenwood Park, and Friends of Havenwood Park benefits from Colwood. I just basically wrote down a few things. Colwood benefits from Friends of Havenwood Park would mean establishes a community-based volunteer group for Havenwood Park for restoration work parties, controls invasives, all of that, delivery of park special events that provide park awareness, education, things like that. Opportunities for the community to help meet the vision goals of the park management plan, just to get citizens involved like we are. A collaboration relationship between the city, the local community, and HAT, the covenant holders. Our group would, Friends of Havenwood Park representation on a park management committee, as suggested in the park management plan, where someone from our group would sit on the park management committee, maybe just in an informal way, as that community part of the committee, park management committee. Maintain a close workingship with the community. It would help tie the community into the management of the park for the city and HAT. Assistance in management plan reviews and updates. There's probably various ways our volunteer group could help with that. And basically the final benefit to Colwood from our group would be just to have representation from the public at large, which I think is important for a lot of things in the city. Just providing input from the local community. And so the next part of this is how Friends of Havenwood Park would benefit from Colwood, because it's a two-way street kind of here. I came up with these ideas. And
Sir.
none of these I've been discussed with my teammates.
Oh, okay. Do you mind if we just move on to the agenda, and if you just because we do have other items.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you
problem.
short,
Yeah.
but we would love you to come present another time if you have additional stuff to say, or
Okay.
we could talk later.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I appreciate being able
Yeah.
to.
Thank you so much, Gary,
Yeah.
Gib, Bruce, and Carol, who's not here for the presentation. And while you're here, if committee had any questions.
I have a couple, Gary. Just they're kind of specific. You mentioned you did a holly pole. Did you pull them or cut them?
We actually pulled them.
Really? Right.
Some of the larger ones
Yeah.
were too difficult to
Mm-hmm.
pull, but a lot of them, it was a wetter day, so you
Yes. Right.
small if we usually pull.
Yeah. It gets the ground's pretty soggy. Yeah. And yeah.
And the other thing is, I know that in the park, I've surveyed where all the holly is, and I know that there's some holly in the park that actually bears fruit.
Sorry, Gary, could we please get you to use the microphone?
To answer your question about that, I'd like to go a little bit further with that. I'd like to cut off some of the higher fruiting holly in the park because that's contributing to spread. And basically with that, we'll just cut off because some of these holly plants are
Yeah. Yeah.
as high as the ceiling in the park.
Yeah.
So that.
And just one other quick thing. The part of the park that is on the east side of the Parkway, are there any plans other than what's there now to do? What do you envision? That there's a trail through it and the creek is there and that. Do you?
Plans in what regard?
Well, just is that it now? It's going to remain like that? Do you have any vision for that side of the park?
Our vision basically right now, I think the priority as far as invasive plant removal, the
Okay.
east side and the west side both need a lot of work.
Right. Okay.
Generally, that's where our group's going to contribute. As far as plans for that park, it's in the city plan, engineering plan, and in the management plan, but that's being followed through. I mean, of course, in Colwood, it's like everywhere else, budget is an issue. This may not happen as on schedule for 2016 or whenever it is, but on that east section of the park, it may be able to. The other issue is the development along the north boundary. We want that to happen with least impact to the park, but at the same time, there could be a benefit to that, perhaps both on parking on veterans and also maybe somehow being able to implement the crosswalk in a more economical fashion, by throwing requirements into the development plan for the developer. And also there'll be a walking bridge that will connect the east side to the west, which is long overdue.
Fine.
On the east side, that's all I know right now that's going on that side of it, outside of just getting rid of the invasive plants.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Null?
Just a quick couple of comments, and then I'll let you go for the evening. I was on council, actually, when we bought the park, when we made the covenants, and when we wrote the management plan. It's nice to see somebody actually doing something with that management plan. I would be really keen on sitting down with you and discussing the trail network you have described. This meeting isn't the right place for that, but if you'd like to give me a call later in the week or early next week, I'd like to discuss that and see what your ideas are.
I definitely think myself and the rest of the team would actually like that. I'm actually going back about when I got more involved with HAT, I was also involved with the city, and I actually GPSed all the existing trails and helped city plan and come up with what Colwood uses now on the website. So to carry that on, at that time we talked about with city staff and the covenant holder exactly what you want to discuss now and continue that on. That would be great, especially with the pressure, the higher use pressure coming on to the park.
Great. Thank you so much, Friends of Havenwood Park, for coming and presenting tonight. And yeah, it was great. And yeah, thank you so much. And I also understand that HAT is doing another event this Saturday from 9:30 in the morning till 2. So I encourage everyone, members of the public and members of the committee, if you can make it, to participate. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
There you go. And so that takes us to 3.2, next item on the agenda, the policy on memorial benches. Ms. Creamer, would you like to address that?
Yes, thank you. November, this was brought to the committee, and it was recommended that staff go and review the benches that we had down at the Esquimalt Lagoon. There's 19 benches, and what they wanted me to contact the donors of the bench to see how many that I could get a hold of, as our records weren't complete. I've contacted 16 of the 19 sponsors regarding the renewal of the benches, and most were happy to renew the benches. A few of them didn't think they should have to renew the benches. In 2004, the city did amend the policy, and prior to 2004, the benches, there was no expiry date, and 2004 council made an expiry date of 10 years. And once that was passed through council, a lot of the donors of the bench, I think a lot of the donors of the benches weren't notified, because when I phoned as the direction of this committee to try and contact them and let them know that their bench was expiring, they were shocked. So I, like I said, I contacted 16 of the 19. 3 of them, all I had was what was on the plaque on the bench. So I'm asking the committee to help to make a recommendation what they want to be done. And right now we have 8 applications for benches down at the Esquimalt Lagoon. And so I'm asking the committee. I've listed some options for the committee that we could contact the donors and ask if they want to renew the bench for 5 years at $432. Or we can grandfather the existing benches that were paid prior to February 23rd, 2004. And the call would be responsible for the maintenance of these benches. And a letter would be sent to the donors that if the bench was damaged, that the city would have the authority to remove the bench. We could grandfather the benches that were paid for prior to 2004, but allow other families to pay to have a plaque put on the bench and notify the existing donor of the bench of that. We could also give all those that paid before 2004 another 10 years extension being enforced before enforcing the policy that was adopted in 2004. For the benches that were installed prior to 2004, do not charge a maintenance fee of $432 for 5 years, but resolve to charge the donor for the repair of the benches and concrete pad if damaged or graffitied. Before works are carried out by the Public Works Department, an estimate would be done on the bench, and the donor would be invoiced for the for the repairs. And if the city did not receive the funds within 3 months, then we would remove the bench. And I listed out the financial options that go along with the options that I listed. What we recommend, what the city decided to recommend is that the Parks and Recreation Committee recommend to Council that the donors of the memorial benches be notified by phone or by letter that the city is extending the rights to have the plaque on the bench for another 10 years without payment, but that due to the difficulty of finding new spots for benches and the queue of people asking for benches as well, that the city, to recoup its costs, the city would be allowing a second donor on each bench, and that staff work with Elsie and the consultant that will be reviewing the erosion of the peninsula to find locations mainly on the lagoon side of the Esquimalt Lagoon to erect more benches which would not negatively impact the bird sanctuary, and that staff remove the plaques from the existing benches where we could not notify the donors, keeping the plaque in case the donor does notify the city and make the benches available for another donor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to open the discussion up to the public. So members of the public, if you would like to say something, please use the microphone, say your name and address.
I will speak. I have a very loud voice, so if I cannot do it, can you hear me? Well, it's being recorded, so okay, thank you. All right.
I don't know how loud this comes across, but anyway. My name's Judy Boyd. I represent myself, my sister, and my 3 brothers. We have a bench down at the lagoon. We purchased it in 2002. At that time, the terms of reference were that we would pay $1,000 to the city of Colwood, and that as long as that $1,000 covered the cost of the bench and the plaque, we were limited to a certain number of words and letters and lines, that was the end of it. So I wrote a letter asking to have a bench, and it was provided, and my brothers and myself and my sister got together and witnessed the installation of it, and we've used it almost every year for some kind of family gathering. We have a member that lives away, but we've had weddings down there, picnics down there. My nephew from Port Alberni was dying of ALS, and he wanted to visit one more time, so he came down, etc. And that's just on a personal level to show you how much that we appreciate being allowed to have that bench down there and use that space. Of course, we can use the space anyway because we can go along and sit on someone else's bench if we want to. At no time was there a mention of a follow-up or were we notified in any way till I heard from Nora, which I believe was earlier on, maybe October or something. And she called, and I was quite taken aback, and I think because I might have been one of the first or second she called, I was very taken aback by this and asked what some of the options might be. Further to that, my brother and I came to the last Parks meeting that was held here and spoke and just expressed our views on this. If you knew my parents, they're very thrifty. And they're also very community-minded, so they would understand that you need to, have these benches looked after and that it does cost money. In reading Nora's report this time, I came and got a copy the other day and I took it home. I do like what's been recommended. I really appreciate that, and I think my brother does too. So on behalf of my family, I really appreciate all the time and effort that you've taken to put this together for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
My name is Linda Vanwater, and I'm trying to get a bench down at Esquimalt Lagoon for one of our dear friends that passed away last year. So I've been trying for 6 months. Prior to that, when he was first diagnosed 2 years prior, him and his wife actually tried to get a bench as well. So they were on the wait list for 2 years. Now it's 2.5 years. He's a true Colwood person. He's lived, raised his family here, done his coaching of the kids' ball team. He worked at Jenner, was a volunteer at the Colwood Fire Department. His home was here. He actually sold it once he was diagnosed with cancer and moved to condos down on Esquimalt Lagoon. And him and his wife spent the last 2 years watching out the window and planning on their bench. So I just want to say that any efforts made to add additional benches would be greatly appreciated. I have a huge letter. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to send it to Nora. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Linda.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to say something? No? Okay, and so I will open up discussion to committee. Would anyone like to say something? Joe?
Thank you. When this, first came up, it was quite a while ago, actually, some months and everything, and I review it, sort of every time in the recommendations. I'm kind of, I'm not too sure where this should go. If you have a bench now, perhaps all that it happens with people is if this bench is hurt or what have you, I don't know, whatever, a wave smashes it, and you want it restored, you will have to have some kind of payment to help the city out doing that. I don't know, $432 just for another 5 years. I don't know whether I'm quite okay with that or not. But I think it's reasonable, as I say, that people perhaps pay something if something goes awry for whatever reason. And I guess you could grandfather, the original people because maybe they weren't quite told exactly how this should or could work. But I just want to get this, Nora, too. There's still some people, you said 3 that you cannot find? That's
Yes, that's correct.
okay, right. Do you think you might ever find them?
I think there's like I say, one was an infant, baby, was only 3 months old, and I have there's 5 names in his name, and I think I've calculated about 20 people that I phone people and say, do you know this person or this, and so it's very difficult because all I'm working with is a name on a bench.
Yeah.
So
yes,
I
I agree. It's those are my thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can understand people. If it was me too, I'd have to tell you that $432 for another 5 years. I might balk at that a little bit. I mean, I get the point of it, but I think maybe another way, there might be a better way to do it. That if this bench needs maintenance, you have to pay for it, or help to pay for it. I mean, so those are my thoughts on the thing. So,
Would anyone else like to say something? Councillor Nault?
Yeah, I walked the whole length of the lagoon this morning and made special effort to look at a bunch of the benches. And to me, the benches all look in fine shape. Some of the plaques are looking a little bit worn. I was wondering if we could maybe make the donors pay for maintenance of the plaques. The benches, I believe, to be city property. We're responsible for them. They provide a benefit to everybody that uses the lagoon. And the donors were kind enough to buy the bench and the plaque. I really don't think we should force a second plaque onto a bench that somebody has named or dedicated to a loved one or a very special event. One question for staff: where does $432 come from? That seems like a very specific number.
I can help to answer that. We put together just an annual cost of, with graffiti and the winter storms and vandalism, and that was the number that was put together from just doing repairs on the benches. So it's overall, it's an approximate cost. It's not necessarily exactly what the benches would be. It has to do with, we've replaced a lot of the bench parts and that sort of thing throughout the years. The benches are holding up quite well. They do, because they're the aluminum benches, but there has been a fair amount of damage to all of them, actually.
And if you don't mind me adding, when with the erosion of this Esquimalt Lagoon, we had to actually physically move the actual bench back, and we had to build it from something. So I mean, there's things that occur down there, and especially what's going on, with the weather and that, we don't know what's to be foreseen.
Yes, go ahead.
In my conversation with Nora, I had mentioned that after the first, maybe 2 years, the plaque on our bench, which is at garbage can number 19, if you want to take a look at it, or sit on it, please do, the paint had started to chip on it. And I, at that time, phoned and asked Colwood if they could go down and take a look at it and see if something could be done, either removed and taken to the shop. And I was told that the whole bench would have to come off its foundation, be taken to the shop, and, you know, I'd be charged for that labor and et cetera. And so at that time, I just chose to do nothing about it because I felt that the workmanship maybe wasn't up to par. Maybe it was just the paint. I don't know. And I figured other people would start having that trouble. Now, I haven't walked the lagoon lately, so I really don't know what the other plaques look like. But, you know, we bought the bench and had you do the plaque according to whoever was doing the plaques. And I can understand that you want them uniform. But that paint, that was just something that happened. So, just so that, you know, people have been aware of it.
Just curiosity, you were okay with one of the recommendations here. How do you feel about having a second family on your bench?
I am all right with that. I don't know how Colwood will manage the payment of that. I guess the other thing that I was concerned about is it costs $432 this year, but what if a lot of things start going wrong down there? And everybody on the street type of thing shares in the cost. I can understand that. But if it were to go up, you know, every year, it seems like, I don't know, I just feel that when you buy a headstone at the graveyard, which, and that isn't exactly what this is, and my parents wouldn't like us to be going to the graveyard. They'd birth at the lagoon. So I just think that somewhere in it, there has to be a bit of give and take. And yes, we do have to help you probably, you know, have a handle on some of those things, and to a certain extent, but I just don't know where the line can be set or drawn or whatever.
Thank you.
So back to the committee. Would anyone else like to say something?
Oh, go ahead,
Thoughts?
Gord.
Gord, yes.
I can't speak to previous park staff before I was here, but we have investigated restoring those plaques, and I do have a couple in right now. The people that made the plaques are looking at them, and one of the plaques I'm going to take in is Mrs. Boyd's plaque. I think so far, I think it's going to be relatively inexpensive to restore those plaques, but I will have a better idea of what that's going to cost at the next Parks meeting.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? I think I'll just voice my concerns. Regardless, someone is going to have to pay, and it's very nice to have these benches. However, I'm not sure if it's fair to have the city continually paying for all the repairs and costs. If we do go with the option of having them grandfathered for an additional 10 years, I'm just like, if I was a resident that didn't live near the lagoon, which I don't really, and I'm not using the benches, would I agree with my taxes being used to keep maintaining these benches? And so I kind of struggle with this. Al, did you have something?
Just making sure I understand what the recommendation is. The recommendation is actually that we grandfather them for 10 more years with no cost, but that a second family could be on the same bench.
Correct.
Okay. There's no easy way of doing this, you know, as obviously. And I would like to move that, move that we accept that recommendation. But I would like to add to it that perhaps we at least check every 5 years, like at 5-year point, and ask if the family's still interested. Families move away, and they may just have no more interest in it, in which point it could change over, not have to go a full 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I understand the problem of being short of benches and other people wanting to get on. I've never been a real proponent of these because this is the sort of thing that happens and it causes bad feelings. But I like benches, and we're going to put some park benches in anyway, so I don't have a real problem with this, the municipality paying for them for the rest of another 10 years. That's my own personal feel on it. But anyway.
Anyone else?
Can I just, yeah, we had one individual that's, the bench is down there for his parents, and he told me that once his mom is gone, that he will give the bench up. So each person has their individual views on it. So, you know.
Did anyone else have something to say? Also, I just wanted to say that the $1,900 per year, and that's for 10 years. So for the financial considerations for option D. So this might go up, right, for 10 years with inflation and everything. So it won't actually be $1,900 every year.
I think that's the cost of the bench is $1,900. I don't think it's per year.
It says per year.
Yeah.
Here. Can I just clarify that? It's $100 per year per bench. So, and there's 19 benches down there. So that's just an estimate. That's an estimate.
Would anyone else from the committee like to say something? No? I also just wanted to point out that out of the 16, 14 said they were okay with the fee for maintaining the benches. So the majority is okay with it.
Sorry. Yes, they were.
Okay.
If you grandfather option D, give those that paid before February 23rd or 4th, and you put a second plaque on, are you not going to charge that person for the plaque $1,900? No.
Looking
The
for
new person that you're going to put the plaque on, you're not going to charge them anything?
according to the policy, it would be $432, right? For an additional plaque on the bench.
You're only going to charge them $432.
For a 5-year term.
That's what it says.
And that is for maintenance. So the 400, that is for maintenance. So the 432 would cover 5 years for a maintenance plan. And that is under the policy that was made in 2004.
Okay. Now you've got 2 plaques on the bench. Now you're going to get almost $900 a year out of each bench for 5 years. You've got 2 plaques on the bench, $432 times 2.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a question, I guess, to staff. If we open it up to 2 plaques and the donors are okay with that, would we be able to do a process of perhaps reimbursement of half the cost? And then the new applicant pays the other half? That's something we could do.
That could be a consideration. Yep.
There's one bench that I know of that already has 2 plaques on it.
That's for the same family.
I understand.
But they back. Oops, sorry. May I talk? Back when that was purchased, it was $1,000, I think, because I wasn't involved in for the entire bench. I think something like that. I'm not sure. But so you bought the bench, and I'm assuming maybe you could have as many plaques as you want. I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in this.
Well, I was, but I wasn't.
Yeah. So that might have been the case.
I think that they should be grandfathered for 10 years, second person, that would be fine as well.
Councillor Knott?
Yes, I personally feel that the benches, once they are donated, are part of the city infrastructure and the city should be responsible for their maintenance. The city decides how many benches are going to be down there. So we have benches in a lot of our parks. The donation of them in the honor of a loved one, I think, is a fantastic action on the part of the family. So I'm going to propose a three-part motion. One, the city take responsibility for maintenance of the existing benches and pads for an indefinite period. Two, any costs for maintenance to the plaques be invoiced to the family. So if the plaques have to be removed and repainted, we could ask the family if they want that to be done. If not, just let them weather naturally. Graveyards have this kind of problem all the time. And three, that the city investigate this paragraph here, that staff work with Elsie and the consultant to blah, 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 see if we want to erect more benches. I'm pretty sure Elsie will come back and say they don't really want to see any more, but that's something we should be reviewing. So that would be my motion in three parts. It's out of the second paragraph out of the staff recommendation.
Did we have someone who wants to second that motion? Oh, don't need, okay. Just for clarification on that, if we were to go for the city maintaining the benches for an indefinite period, if, for example, a storm comes and the bench is completely wiped out, would we be replacing the entire bench, or would we just have it gone?
I believe that would be up to the city to decide. The city should be deciding how much parks infrastructure we need, and if 19 benches is too many, then if benches get destroyed, then we should probably rescue the plaque and return it to the family. But certainly, maintenance of the benches as they are should be the city's responsibility.
I'm a little confused. Are we asking for $432 a year? Are we asking for $432 for 5 years? And we charged $1,000 originally, and now we're charging $400? Is that what's happening?
The cost of the benches are $1,000. That's what it costs, and then the installation and that sort of thing. So that's what it costs to put the bench in, and we've done our very best to keep that price as low as possible. Benches are really expensive, so we've done everything we can to keep that cost low. And then the $432 over the 5 years is strictly maintenance, and that has to do with vandalism and just plain aging as the benches age.
It strikes me that someone new should pay at least for half a bench to get on, as they're, if we ask the original people to pay for the full amount of the bench, and now we're saying that we'll give you half a bench for basically just the maintenance cost, it doesn't seem equitable to me. But that's just how I see it.
If I could clarify my motion is that the city maintain the existing benches, that the families be responsible for maintenance of the plaques on those benches, and that should any future benches be decided upon, they would be by the city's original policy where the person pays for the bench, the pad, and the plaque. But that is a future discussion. I'm not proposing at this time that we allow or don't allow more benches. But this would put everybody on the same field. The new families would pay for the entire bench and pad and plaque. The city would then adopt maintenance of the bench, the donor would keep maintenance of the plaque as their responsibility.
Councillor, but just for the plaque, not for the damage to the bench and any damage, just the plaque.
I guess just to clarify too on the motion, if a bench is damaged to the point where it has to be fully replaced, is that considered the same bench or a completely new one?
It's up to this committee to decide, I believe.
Okay.
We have replaced benches before, and then the same plaque has been put on. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a brand new bench. It would be a brand new bench, but the same plaque would be put back on that same bench. We just replaced one now that was destroyed several years ago that we didn't have in the budget for a couple of years to actually replace, that we just finally replaced and are going to put the same plaque back on it. Does that answer your question?
Any other further discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion is carried. That takes us to our next item. 3.3, Neighborhood Nights Special Event Application.
The neighborhood nights. The City of Colorado received a special event application from the West Shore Parks and Recreation to hold the neighboring nights through the summer months with July and August, in conjunction with the City of Langford and also the town of View Royal. We get many special event applications to hold events in our parks, but I felt this was a bigger event that should be brought to the committee. These events is going to happen on July 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, 30th, 13th, and 20th. So what they're proposing, if they want to utilize the Colwood Creek Park on Thursday nights between the hours of 6 and 8:30 p.m. to hold a family event. And this is the West Shore Parks and Recreation. And I'm bringing this forward to the committee as they have requested from the city to provide a portable toilet for the event. And I discussed this with the engineer, and we have a portable toilet in our public works that we could use for this event. And we could take it there on a Thursday night about 4 o'clock and then pick it up on the Friday morning at 8. What I did not do is put a recommendation in here, but I'd like to, I've got a recommendation here that I'd like to bring forward to the committee. That the Park and Recreation Culture Committee recommend to Council that the City of Colwood support the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society Neighborhood Nights event to be held through the summer months of July and August in the City of Colwood, City of Langford, and Town of View Royal. And the City of Colwood grant permission to the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society to hold the Colwood Neighborhood Night event on Thursday evenings in Colwood Creek Park between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. on July 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th, and August 6th, 13th, and 20th. And the Public Works Department be directed to provide a portable toilet for this event to be set up at the Colwood Creek Park site on the applicable Thursday by 4 p.m., and the portable toilet be picked up from the site on Friday at 8 a.m. And the costs associated with this support, estimated approximate $300, be an in-kind contribution from the City of Colwood.
Okay, I'm going to open up the discussion to the public. Did you want to say anything, Linda? Nope. Okay, up to committee. Councillor Nault.
I do have concerns about a couple of things in here. First is the number of times it's going to be held in Colwood Creek Park. Second is amplified music. I have put up with a lot of amplified music coming from the school down the hill from me that holds jazzercise all summer. And they use a small amplified system too, but you can hear it all over the neighborhood. 6:30 to 8:30 every night isn't all that much, but I really don't know what on earth family-friendly music is. Some families like country and western, some like jazz, some like acid rock, so I have no idea what that is. I don't like the idea of amplified music. I suggest we make them have live acoustic music. And the second is the question of the financial implications. You said $300. Is that $300 per time?
It's for the whole, for the everything, and that is pretty much just the maintenance and transportation costs for the porta potty.
So that's $40 a pop for the 8 events. I find that awfully low if you have to load it, clean it, unload it. It's a pretty fast turn. You got a pit crew down there?
Our public works yard is fairly close to Colwood Creek, and it's not a big porta john. It's just a regular size one. It's really light. It fits on a regular. One person can actually move it onto a regular pickup truck.
Full or empty?
No, it has to be emptied first.
Linda, sure.
Hello, it's Linda Barnes, West Shore Parks and Recreation. I did want to just clarify the actual activity because I think it's really important and it's very exciting. We have put in a grant with the Recreation Foundation BC. We're looking at a $9,000 grant to take out to all of the municipalities. So there's quite a significant investment in putting on this event in your parks, and we're looking at it less of an event and more of a galvanizing of the community to be using the parks, and we're hoping that there'll be some this will be kind of the catalyst for some of the neighbors to take charge of using the parks more often, and we're sort of bringing some activities to show people what can be done in their neighborhood parks. And we've chosen 3 municipalities to showcase this in, and we were very delighted that last night we got word that Thrifty Foods is also going to sponsor it, and we'll be bringing healthy snacks and some of their managers as well to help with some of the activities in the park. So I think that the idea of it is not, again, when you talk about amplified music, I will check on that because the idea was more around bringing baseball gloves and things down to the park and putting on some things that families can do together. And hopefully all the people that will be enjoying the music will be or that will be hearing the music will be enjoying the activity at the park. And we won't have any problems with complaints about music. But I certainly understand about the amplified music, and we'll make sure that you know, if there's any other options or we can do other activities. I think that was just some of the things that had been suggested. There was a bit of a fitness class component to that, so I can certainly look at that.
Thank you. Anyone else on committee like to say something? Okay, and guess just sure.
How many neighbors would be close vicinity of that area? I haven't.
Yeah, I had a question about also with the amplified music is in our city bylaw. It doesn't specify for community noise or noise within the community. However, it does specify for construction hours, and that's from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. So here we have proposed till 6:30 at night till 7:30, and so that might be in conflict with our bylaw, or we might have to check on that.
Why don't we just ignore it?
Yes, it would. We would have to ask for an exemption of the noise bylaw for that. But I didn't do another report. I thought in conjunction with this recommendation that you as a committee would say yes to this, and then would pass on to council. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe I don't know.
So, Nora, so if I could ask you, could you repeat the motion?
Certainly. That the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee recommend to Council that the City of Colwood support the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society's Neighborhood Night event to be held through the summer months of July and August in the City of Colwood, City of Langford, and Town of View Royal. And the City of Colwood grant permission to the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society to hold the Colwood Neighborhood Night event on Thursday evenings in Colwood Creek Park between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. on July 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th, and August 6th, 12th, and 20th. And the Public Works Department be directed to provide a portable toilet for this event to be set up at the Colwood Creek Park site on the applicable Thursday by 4 p.m. and that the portable toilet be picked up from the site on Fridays at 8 a.m. and the cost associated with this support, estimated at approximately $300, be an in-kind contribution from the City of Colwood.
Okay, thank you. Did someone want to make that motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? See none, the motion is carried. Islander. And that leads us to our last item on the agenda, 3.4, litter pickup on Veterans Memorial Parkway Boulevard. Ms. Creamer?
Okay. So it was tasked to me to, I believe, I'm not sure, engineering has directed me to take a look at the stretch of the Veterans Memorial Parkway from Kelly Road to Sooke Road, which is actually in Colwood, but maintained, looked after by Ministry of Transportation, and in turn is looked after by Main Road, if I'm correct. So they do all the litter pickup along that stretch. It's quite a dirty little section of road because it does get a lot of litter through there. So I was asked to do an estimate of what it cost the city to actually pick up litter there on a regular basis, like we normally do on our city streets, and that was. Just for the labor and disposal, and this is just an estimate, would be somewhere between $150 to $30 or $300 dollars per month for us to pick up the litter along that stretch of road. We normally the VMP from Sooke Road to Carindale is another stretch that usually collects a lot of litter as well, and we normally have to do that that section, once to 2 times a month. And what we do at the Parks Department is try and do a citywide cleanup once a month.
Thank you. And I'll open up discussion to committee. Committee members?
Why not just leave it as it is now? I mean, is somebody pressuring Colwood to? I mean, why? If it's their Mott's job, well, let them do it.
We have gotten, I get numerous complaints because it is in Colwood of why we don't clean up the litter along that stretch of road. And when I explain to people that it's actually looked after by MOT, you know, it's, well, you can't stop and pick up the litter. A lot of that sort of thing. So I do get probably 3 to 4 calls a month because people see us out picking up litter and then we're not picking up litter on that stretch of road. And it is a really dirty stretch of road. It does get a lot of litter through there just because of the wind that blows through there. The park on the one side, construction, it's a truck route, so there's a lot of litter that the trucks carry through there as well and that sort of thing. We do actually, it's a bit of a funny stretch of road because Colwood Creek Park borders that road as well, and we do actually take care of the park to the ditch line. So we maintain that whole area of the ditch line from the ditch line up to the park. I mean, so we're already picking litter up there to a certain extent, and we're doing all the roadside mowing and taking care of that whole section of road. So I think people see that as well as we're only going to a certain point and then we stop. It just, for residents in Colwood, they're wondering why we're doing that.
How much? What are we doing for $150 to $300 a month? How many hours or days or?
Well, it would be on our regular litter pickup day, and we've never walked that, and we have to walk it and pick up the litter. So I'm not exactly sure how long it would take us. I estimated a two-man crew. I think about 3 hours is what I estimated it for to do it. It could take longer. I mean, it's a bit longer of a stretch from our other area of VMP, and I have seen it be like full of garbage through there. Main Road actually uses their quads in there to do it. I'm not sure how many times Main Road does it, but we would be doing it for sure once a month, and then we would do it as needed or as directed.
Yeah, okay, right. I just hate this kind of stuff, where people throw their garbage into public ditches public ditches, and then, the rest of the citizens get to pick it up, and pay for it. I remember when we were talking about Lookout Lake, if you remember too, and remember the garbage, the woman said, people throw garbage on the side of the road, and I was told by, it might have been Michael Baxter, I can't remember now, that, no, it's not our policy in Colwood to pick up, garbage on the side of the road. I don't know what happened to this woman with her garbage, but, however, if it helps out people and people are happier if Colwood does it, sure, okay, I'll go for it. I suppose you have to do something. Can't leave garbage all over the place. Sorry, can't leave garbage all over the place. So yeah, I don't care about the cost. It just the thing bothers me, But sure, make the citizens happy because that's part of the job for Colwood, And so.
Have we talked to Main Road yet about doing it more often?
No.
No, we haven't. I'm sorry. That's part of I didn't put the the recommendation is there that we approach Main Road and ask them if what their schedule is, if they can increase their schedule, and or would they cover partial, or I think the city is at this point is even looking at taking on a bigger role on that stretch of roads.
Yeah.
But Main Road has not been contacted yet, though I'm sure they've gotten complaints because I have given their number out to many people.
And I,
Good.
I'd like to hear their response. They may only require a change of emphasis from one area to another for them, and it may not be a problem. I mean, if we let them know there is a problem and that we're not real happy with it.
Did anyone else have anything to say? I'm just looking for clarification on the contract. So I'm assuming the city has a contract with Main Road Contracting. So if they're not maintaining that stretch of veteran, is that not impeachment on the contract?
MOT has a contract with them. It's actually not a stretch of road that the city takes care of. It's a stretch of road that Ministry of Transportation takes care of. It's the same with the stretch of Sooke Road from VMP to Jackland is in Colwood, but it's actually maintained by Ministry of Transportation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councillor Knoll?
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation. I think it's reasonable to our citizens, and I would really like to see Main Road pay for all of it if we could. And failing this approach, that we should start continually complaining to the province, because they are ultimately responsible. But first, see if Main Road will pay for it, and if not, then kick it up a notch.
and do you want us to contact Main Road and bring it back to the committee for review?
I would suggest probably bring it back to committee would be the appropriate.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? See none, motion is carried. And that leads us to our next meeting, 4.1. So next meeting will be Monday, April 20th, 2015 at 5:30 p.m. And could I get a motion to adjourn?
I will so move.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? See none. Meeting is adjourned.